Listeners.
Book babes and book bros.
Welcome to Book Babble. We're Rachel,
And Tanya, aka the Witlet Women, and your host for the day.
and today we have Catherine Castillo, author of Shards in the Darkness, and she's in the hot seat for our rapid fire AMA. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi everyone. I'm Catherine. People call me Kate. Some people call me Kate, Catherine. Pretty much right now it's pretty. I do have a different name. Like I do have a set of different names, but that is fine. So actually, In the Darkness of Shards, Poems from a Broken Place is already my third book. So it wasn't like the first nor the second, it was the third, but for me, this was the book that's like meant for the public. So it was really nice to just get it out, and I'm happy to meet all of you. Hmm.
Well, we're happy to have you on. Are you ready to babble?
I'll go for it. I'm ready to babble. Sure.
Yeah, so what advice would you give to aspiring writers who want to publish their own book?
Mm, I don't know. I mean, I'm not going to be one of those people or individuals who would just say go for it. I'm more of a realist. So I think when you do something, you gotta make sure that your perseverance, your competence, everything is like on check before you actually do it. So when you decide to kind of release your book, I think you would have to check, okay, what is my intent for doing this book? Do I have the competence to actually start and finish the book? Am I going to get help? Those type of questions before actually releasing a book. It's not just going for it. There's like a lot of things that you have to think about before doing something. I'm the type of person who, when I do something, I go all out. So that would be my advice. Not the best, go for it.
Oh,
Cheers.
great advice.
So,
It is great advice, yeah.
so,
I think it's very useful for
mm,
authors who are trying to get published and put out their
mm.
work. So what's the most unexpected reader feedback that you've received about In the Darkness of Shards or any other books that you've published so far?
It's pretty interesting because so when upon releasing the book, I've already like had a couple of reviews from mix of like friends, families, people all over the globe. But so I looked at Amazon like I think days ago, and I got this review, and it was just like a one-liner. It was from someone in the United States. Like, it was published here in the United States. It was made in the United States rather, and it said that my book was like a sexy read. And I wasn't really sure how to feel about it that time because like, okay, I don't think abuse is like sexy at all, or I don't know which part was sexy along, a part of the book. So it was a bit strange, but at the same time, it's like I could probably charge this to art in a way that okay, you can interpret whatever you want to interpret, along the lines of art. But it was really strange. But I think what mattered to me whenever I get those type of reviews is the fact that people actually allocate their time to read it. So hope that answers the question in some way or form.
Oh, it definitely
Absolutely.
does,
Yeah.
yes.
Mm.
No, I absolutely loved
I mean, you've read my book, right?
yes,
So
yes, I absolutely
yeah,
loved it. I think I emailed you or texted you or something. I communicated with you as soon as I read it and
yeah,
or as I was reading
right,
it, and it was such an emotionally charged, like beautiful book. So I
right.
mean, it's just I
But
loved it.
sexy wouldn't be the first.
Sexy wasn't like the first
No,
word, but like
not the first
That's
description
not
I would
gonna be the
use, but
first description, exactly. So
so how did
yeah, it
you
was a good laugh.
yeah,
Okay.
how did you know that this was the genre that you wanted to write?
Actually, like I would be the type of person who would have a reason for everything, who would kind of like try to create like a mind map for things. I had been writing since I was 20. In fact, when I was in college, I was like a managing director of our publishing club, like the section of the university where we kind of publish. I don't know why I keep on saying kind of this morning. I think I'm being polite, but like to release newspapers, And but in my 20s, I traveled a lot. I traveled a lot. I felt a lot. That's kind of like the time wherein you fell in love, you traveled, you kind of like got lost within yourself, and find your path. And I also have a singing background. So, when you do have a singing background on the performing arts, you got used to patterns and rhythms, and so I think I carried that with words. So back then I would just write without actually knowing what genre I was like writing. I was just writing stories, what happened in my day, what happened in this trip, but it had words, not necessarily the rhyme and all that. But eventually I figured, okay, if I'm going to be releasing this book, I want to stick to what I know. I didn't want to be pretentious. I didn't want to like study further because this, the content in itself is rich and heavy already. So I thought, and I've been journaling too all throughout my experience. And so I thought, okay, maybe what I would do is to just, revise it in a way that it sounds me, it feels like me. I can talk about this, I can read this like anytime. So I think that's how I knew that this is going to be the type of genre I will use for my third book. I called it poetry, but I think in other terms they use it as like verse novel, but I think it's too short for a novel either. So along those lines, yeah.
Well, we have just a few seconds left, so I'm going to
Hmm.
ask you a really important question. Can
Sure.
you tell me a secret about your book that no one knows?
Oh, so the last poem, it's okay for me to say it. It's called Closure. Each revision, I cried. So I cried. It was pretty heavy for me until such time that, upon publishing it, yeah, that's a secret.
All
I
right, so that's the dramatic noise that you hear when the
Mm,
timer stops. So we're at five
yeah,
minutes.
right.
I don't know.
Okay.
When you're talking about that secret, I just think that that's beautiful. I cried the whole way
Mm.
through your book. I
Yeah.
love it. Like, and it's such the best way
Thank
possible. It's
you.
just so
Mhm.
relatable for people who have gone through similar situations, and um,
Right.
I don't know. You've put words to a place that I just don't know that everyone is able to access in their soul, and it's just wonderful.
Right. Actually, when I released the book, so before you could probably relate to this because you said that, you cried all throughout the book that you really, before the relationship and within the relationship and after the relationship, you kind of already have an idea on who you are. I mean, I'm 36 years young, so which means I've lived most of my life without him. So I already have a pretty good baseline and the way that my family and friends knew me, right? So upon like towards the end of the relationship, it just feels like I really lost my sense of self, so to speak. So going back to that last part, closure, when I created that poem, like I really wanted, I don't know, it's kind of like a song when you sing it, you wanted to sing it in a way that feels like it's connected, like you and the song are one, right? So it's the same with a poem, but each time that I revised it, like, oh my God, I bawled. And I want to continue actually that section. So upon publishing the book, so I published it, right? So right after, sessions of crying, I published it before end of the year. Um, I've never read a book uh, after I published it. And the first time that I will be reading it in public is going to be this coming March for World Poetry Day. So I will be reading that poem. And let's see how I'd fare. I hope I don't bawl out. I hope I don't cry. Um, but yeah, one of the concerns that I did have, because before I didn't really care about so much about what people think. During a relationship, I really relied on his validation. But after the relationship, I thought, what would my parents think, upon releasing this book? And I think it's normal for you to have those thoughts because I was not with them. They probably might think that, they weren't able to protect me. It might, cause like, not the kind of image I bring to the family. Those type of things you think about, right? But it ended up really fine. Like my family showed up and yeah, they loved the book. So
Goodness, I'm so excited and proud of you for that. Like
thank you.
being able to read that on World Poetry Day in front of an audience, that's huge.
Mhm.
That is
I
so
think
huge.
Yeah, I think it's like a way for me to also see how I fare, right? Upon reading it. I really mind those small big steps of like signs of healing for me. J- just an example, like I think weeks ago I tried to watch Interstellar, and the last part I still cried, but I knew I cried because of the scenario between the father and daughter, not because I remembered him, not because at some point or before it was our favorite, but before that it was my favorite. So I feel like I'm reverting back to, my sense of self, so to speak. Mm.
That's beautiful. Like the emotions that you can feel throughout your writing and even just now talking to you, I mean it's you've just come a long way. Like you can see it in your writing and in your the way that you're acting right now. I love it.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's such a catharsis. I think, well, I'm not a published author, but I can imagine
Mhm.
writing would be cathartic and then also reading it. So your audience, I think, has found such a safe space to start healing and recovering for themselves too.
True. When I released the book, my primary motivation, it's funny because my primary motivation is this is going to be part of my healing. So you know the not a quote, but it's what they say. So of course I had been depressed. And one way to kind of counter depression is to creation, basically, because depression is caused by all over, I mean, for us to consume so much, right? So you have to create to counter that. So I consumed fears, I consumed like I lost myself, you know, along those lines. And then I ended up creating. So for me, it's like right after the book, I've gotten a lot of people asking me, are you going to create another one? Of course, I'm going to create another one, but that is not the time for it. I really want to be in this stage where I'm more than an author. I'm a dancer, I'm a pole fitness dancer, and I do Latin dances as well. I do sing. I do play the piano. So I do have a rich background in the arts, but I think during that a year and a half relationship, I stopped everything about me. I stopped hiking. I was so focused on finding my footing, being a mother, satisfying him, all those type of goals within yourself that aren't even your goals and dreams to begin with, right? So I love the idea of creating another book, but of course, you need content, you need to live first, kind of like how I lived that experience.
You said something that was just really impactful for me, which is that I'm not just an author, and you have such this diverse background of interest and things that make you who
Mhm.
you are. And I think
Right.
that's incredible because through the pages of the book, I could read the dimension of who you are, but standing in front of me and speaking that, I think that's just
Mhm.
something that a lot of people need to hear is that I'm more than just one thing.
Right. I think one thing to describe the book, I mean, it was all emotions, right? And I think what made it special also for me is, if you I think it's normal for us to think about like what my parents would feel, right? But I just, went for it. So my motivation was to heal. But eventually, when it was already out, I've gotten people saying like, I've never read poetry before. I haven't even, read poetry in my entire life or since high school. And all of a sudden, I'm into this book, and I'm like, okay, that's probably the secondary thing that maybe I should not convinced, but I think the book was able to provide a secondary objective, which is to get people to reading poetry or to be into poetry, to try it out. So it's just like one thing leads to another in a way you find a sense of fulfillment just by being out there. Um, about my background, I had been in the healthcare space, I had been in the tech space as well. So I'm an introvert, so just to give an explanation about that, my big five, I do have a high openness to experience, but I am an introvert. So as I'm telling you this, it's like I love the idea of flying. I love the idea of diving. I mean, do. I am a certified rescue diver, and I'm also a student pilot here in the US. So I do things every now and then, depending on how I feel. But I think in the book, you would also sense that even if I had reached the secure type of attachment, I had been anxious. Now, we all have our baseline. And so I engaged myself in activities wherein I am in the mercy of something. So when you fly, when you dive, you're in the mercy of nature. You kind of balance off yourself. So I knew that I was doing something for my overall healing, but that relationship just threw me off. But at least it created something beautiful for not just for me, but for others, right? So, mm.
Yeah, I absolutely love how focused you are on arts and just like creating things throughout your life and sharing that with the world. So like just from the bottom of my heart, thank you. Thank you for opening yourself to that,
Mhm.
and for sharing it with us.
Well, thank you for reading my book, and I was really happy to meet other people and in this way, in other formats, in other form as well. It just validates that the book has its purpose, if that makes sense. It's not just for me, but for others as well. That I was
Absolutely.
able to give a voice to certain people who weren't able to kind of articulate what happened to them or, you know. are not brave enough to actually write it down for them, because I have encountered a couple of, some people wrote to me and said the same. So, yeah.
Yeah, I've been recommending it to anyone I know who enjoys poetry and even people who don't.
Hmm.
And also, so I not to go into my other life, but I have a
No,
practice, and so in my practice, I'm also suggesting to some of my the people I work with that they,
right.
could read the story and learn from the healing journey of someone else and just feel related to, right? Like
Right.
you're not alone in all of this, and I just think it's wonderful that we're able to share
Mm.
that creatively and in a space that's just so rich. So.
Right. And to be honest, I also want to add that it might be at a latter part of the experience, but I think what makes it healing and redemptive in that sense is that when you were feeling those feelings and when you were thinking the same way that it was in the book, you're probably isolated. You didn't really know what was happening at that time, and you didn't really have the words to kind of express what you felt. So the book might happen towards the latter part of one's experience, but it's redemptive in a way because you were able to voice it out in some way by reading or by actually understanding what went on. Because as you know, when you're in a fog, you really can't think straight. And yeah, you're in that situation, you're just so confused, I think. So mm.
Agreed. All right, well, I think that we're just about out of time. Are there any last words, any other things you want to cover before we have to cut off at the end?
Sure. I actually just want to thank everyone who supported my journey so far. I released the book towards the end of the year. I didn't really expect much externally. It was more a way for me to heal internally, but I have seen that people have received my book well. I mean, even more than well, great. And I just wanted to say thank you for supporting me. Thank you for reading the book. It validates my experience, and I sure hope that I have given voices to others as well. And continue recommending my book to everyone.
We definitely will. And it's awesome. Also, I just want to bring up that you are doing a book tour with Happily Booked PR. So if
Mhm.
anyone wants to read it, make sure you go visit them and get on their list so you
Yeah.
can read In the Darkness of Shards.
Yes, thank you.